Hi, I am Danny Wu, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the graph, which illustrates the real minimum wage in Mexico from 1969 to 2019, adjusted to constant pesos for the second half of July 2018. In the x-axis, the horizontal axis represents the years from 1969 to 2019. Y-axis, which is the vertical axis, shows the value of the real minimum wage in constant pesos. The adjustment accounts for inflation, providing a more accurate measure of purchasing power over time. We can tell that there are some economic challenges, periods of high inflation, drastically reducing the purchase power of minimum wage. Some observations about the real value of the minimum wage is uh, there are initial high values in the early years and 1969 to 1975. The real minimum wage was relatively high, fluctuating around 200 to 300 pesos. There's a steady decline from the late 1970s to mid 1980s. There is a noticeable steady decline in the real minimum wage. And then there's a rapid decline in the mid 1980s, around somewhere here. This is the most dramatic decline occurring in mid 1980s, where the real minimum wage drops sharply. And then there's a stabilization and a very slow increase around here, uh, which is from the mid 1990s onwards. The real minimum wage shows a period of relative stability with a gradual increase beginning around the mid 2000s. And then there's recent improvements from 2010 going onwards, suggesting a recent improvement in real minimum wage. And then changes over time. The real minimum wage started at high levels but experienced a significant decline. This period corresponds to various economic challenges, including the oil crisis and debt crisis, which impacted Mexico's economy. And then from 1986 to 1996, a period of severe economic adjustments and high inflation further eroded the purchasing power of the minimum wage, resulting in its lowest levels in the mid-1990s. And then from 1997 to 2005, the real minimum wage stabilized but remained low. And then from 2006 to 2019, there is a noticeable slow but a steady increase in the real minimum wage, indicating some recovery in the purchasing power of minimum wage earners. Some effects of inflation on people's lives. And there's erosion of purchasing power, which is high inflation periods, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s, drastically reduced the real value of wages. And then there's economic hardship. The sharp decline in the real minimum wage during high inflation periods likely led to significant economic hardship for minimum wage earners, exacerbating poverty levels and reducing the standard of living. And then there's stabilization benefits. The periods of economic stabilization and controlled inflation in the late 1990s and 2000s helped to halt the decline in real wages, providing relief to wage earners. And then there's also some recent improvements and the gradual increase in the real minimum wage in recent years, suggesting efforts to improve the living standards of low-income workers. Thank you.